a mountain where everything changed. The morning was quiet on the hills of Galilee, but the crowd gathering below felt anything but calm. Fishermen with rough hands, mothers holding tired children, elders leaning on wooden sticks. Everyone had come with the same silent hope. Maybe today we'll finally hear something that makes sense of this life. Jesus stood at the higher ground, not with the posture of a ruler, but with the calm strength of someone who already knew every heart in the valley. And when he sat down, the noise died instantly. Something in his presence made people breathe differently, like the world itself paused to listen. No thunder, no grand introduction, just a voice steady enough to cut through every fear and every wound. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. For a moment, the crowd didn't know what to do with those words. Poor in spirit, blessed, people who felt empty, unworthy, spiritually broken. He was calling them blessed. You could almost feel the shock run through the hillside. All their lives they had been told, strength is blessed, status is blessed, achievement is blessed. But Jesus turned the entire idea of greatness upside down with one sentence. To the fisherman who blamed himself for every failed attempt, to the widow who felt God had forgotten her, to the young man standing alone after losing everything, Jesus wasn't shaming their emptiness, he was honoring it. Poor in spirit didn't mean weak. It meant the kind of person who finally stops pretending they can fix themselves. The one who admits, God, I need you, and to Jesus. That honesty wasn't a flaw, it was the first key to the kingdom. As he spoke, some people felt their burdens loosen for the first time in years. Others felt a strange warmth rise in their chest, like hope waking up after a long sleep. Because here was the truth they had never heard. Heaven doesn't open for the perfect, it opens for the honest. And on that mountain, as the sun climbed higher, Jesus handed his listeners the first key, a key that didn't require power, money, or influence, only a heart humble enough to reach toward God. Tears God never ignores. As the wind brushed across the hillside, Jesus paused almost as if giving the crowd time to breathe in the hope he had just delivered. But the silence didn't last long. His next words were softer, deeper, almost like a hand reaching into the hidden places of the heart. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Some gasped quietly, others lowered their heads, because everyone on that mountain carried a story of loss. A father who buried a child, a woman abandoned by someone she trusted, a young man grieving dreams that never came true. Mourning wasn't a distant idea, it was the pain they woke up with every day. And Jesus didn't tell them to stay strong, or move on, or pretend everything is fine. He didn't call their tears a sign of weakness. He called them a doorway to divine comfort. In that moment, people realized something radical. God isn't just the God of celebration. He's the God who steps into the darkest corners of the human heart. A fisherman near the front wiped his face, remembering the brother he lost at sea. For years, no one had understood his silent grief. But now, standing in the presence of Jesus, he felt something he had never felt before. Like someone finally saw the sorrow he carried. Another woman in the crowd, whose hands still shook when she remembered her past, felt a sudden warmth settle over her, not because her pain vanished, but because she sensed a truth her heart needed. God doesn't ignore broken hearts. He moves toward them. Jesus wasn't promising a life without heartbreak. He was offering something far more powerful, the kind of comfort that touches the soul, not just the situation. A comfort that restores, a comfort that whispers, "You are not alone." A comfort that turns even the deepest tears into seeds of strength. This was the second key to the kingdom, not avoiding pain, but bringing it honestly before God, and discovering that He meets you right there, exactly where it hurts. The crowd listened, their grief now mixed with hope, because for the first time, they understood. Every tear they had ever cried had been seen by heaven, the strength hidden inside the gentle. The crowd leaned in closer, their hearts still soft from the promise of divine comfort. Jesus looked across the faces tired men, restless youth, mothers holding sleeping children, and then His voice carried across the hillside again. "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." The words struck the crowd like a sudden hush of wind. Meek, blessed. To them, meekness meant being stepped on, overlooked, forgotten. The world they lived in rewarded loud voices, clenched fists, and strong reputations. Nobody admired the gentle. Nobody followed the humble. But Jesus wasn't speaking about weakness. He was speaking about a strength the world could never imitate. To Jesus, the meek were not powerless. They were the ones who had learned how to hold power without letting power hold them. A carpenter in the crowd remembered how he used to react instantly when insulted, shouting back, fighting back, burning inside with anger. But the older he grew, the more he realized something. Rage didn't make him strong. It made him fragile. Now, hearing Jesus speak, he finally understood why. Meekness wasn't about silence. It was about self-control when everything inside you wants to explode. It was choosing peace when pride begged for revenge. It was rising above the noise not by force, but by character. And Jesus promised something unbelievable to such people. They shall inherit the earth, not the violent, not the arrogant, not the ones who push everyone aside to get ahead, but the gentle hearts, the patient souls, the ones who quietly hold their integrity even when the world tests them. A young boy sitting near the front looked at Jesus with wide eyes. His whole life, he had been told that only the strong survive. But now he was hearing a new definition of strength, one that sounded deeper, truer, almost like a secret reserved for those willing to live differently. Jesus wasn't calling people to shrink back from life. He was calling them to rise, with a softness powerful enough to transform everything it touched. This was the third key to the kingdom, the power of a controlled spirit, strength wrapped in humility. And as the crowd absorbed his words, many realized something they had never seen before. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who chooses gentleness, the hunger that changes a life. The sun climbed higher above the hillside, casting warm light over the crowd. Some shaded their eyes, others simply stared at Jesus, unable to look away. Each beatitude felt like a key turning inside their hearts, unlocking something they didn't know they had lost. Then Jesus spoke again, his voice steady, filled with purpose. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled." A quiet murmur moved through the crowd. Everyone knew what hunger felt like. Everyone knew what thirst did to the body. Their world was hard, and survival was a daily battle. But Jesus wasn't talking about bread or water. He was talking about a deeper hunger. A hunger for a life that actually felt right, clean, meaningful. A young man in the middle of the crowd clenched his fists slowly. He had spent years chasing things that never satisfied him. Money that slipped away. Approval that never lasted. Choices that left him empty at night. And now, hearing Jesus, he felt something stir inside him. A different kind of hunger, one he couldn't ignore anymore. Jesus was describing the people who were done with pretending, the ones who felt the ache of wanting to be better than their past, the ones who longed for purity, honesty, purpose, the ones whose souls were starving for something the world could never give. And to them, Jesus offered a promise more filling than any feast. They shall be filled, not halfway, not temporarily, completely. A mother holding her child close felt her eyes water. She had always prayed for her family to walk in truth, but life's hardships had buried that desire under exhaustion. Now it resurfaced bright and alive like a flame that refused to die. A fisherman near the front nodded slowly. He understood. He had felt that emptiness to the kind that no achievement, no possession, no praise from people ever solved. But here, standing in the presence of Jesus, that emptiness suddenly felt like an invitation. This was the fourth key to the kingdom, a desperate, genuine longing for God's ways, the kind of desire that reshapes your heart from the inside out. Because the only life that truly satisfies is the one aligned with the truth. And as Jesus' words settled into the hearts of those listening, many realized, you don't find righteousness by trying to look perfect. You find it when your soul hungers for what is real. The mercy that rewrites stories. The hillside had grown completely silent now. Every word Jesus spoke felt like a beam of light breaking through clouds. People weren't just listening, they were changing. You could see it in their eyes, in the way they leaned forward, in how their breaths slowed as if their souls were paying attention. Then Jesus spoke again, and his words felt like a gentle hand reaching for wounded hearts. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. A single sentence, yet it hit the crowd with the weight of a lifetime. Mercy wasn't common in their world. Rome ruled with iron. People protected themselves with suspicion. Old grudges were carried like heavy stones no one knew how to put down. Forgiveness felt dangerous. Compassion felt costly. Grace felt impossible. But Jesus wasn't describing something weak. He was describing one of the most powerful forces heaven ever released into the world. A man near the back lowered his head, remembering the neighbor he hadn't spoken to in years. The bitterness had grown roots deep inside him. But for the first time, he felt something break like a chain snapping quietly in his chest. A woman holding her child remembered the friend who betrayed her trust. She had carried that wound like a scar that refused to heal. But now, as Jesus spoke, she sensed something different, a softness she hadn't felt in years. Mercy wasn't forgetting. Mercy wasn't pretending it never hurt. Mercy was choosing to stop the cycle. Choosing healing over revenge. Choosing freedom over carrying poison in the soul. And Jesus promised something breathtaking. If you give mercy, mercy will find you. Not just from people, not just once, but from God himself. A young fisherman clenched his jaw. He had always believed strength meant payback. But Jesus was offering a new kind of strength, the kind that rewrites stories, rebuilds relationships, and heals the human heart. Because mercy doesn't make you a victim. Mercy makes you free. This was the fifth key to the kingdom. A heart that reflects God's heart, slow to anger, rich in compassion, ready to forgive. And as the wind moved across the hillside, many realized something profound. When you show mercy, you're not just giving someone else a second chance. You're giving yourself one too. The heart that God can see through. The crowd sat in absolute stillness now. Even the breeze felt quieter, as if creation itself was listening. Every beatitude so far had peeled back another layer of the human soul, revealing truths people had never dared to believe. And then Jesus spoke again, slow, clear, and piercing. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. A soft ripple went through the crowd. Not shock this time, but longing. Everyone could fake purity on the outside. Anyone could look holy for a moment. But the heart, that was the place no one else could see, except God. A young woman in the front held her breath. She had spent years hiding her fears, her insecurities, her mistakes. Outwardly, she looked composed, but inside, she constantly fought shadows she never talked about. Hearing Jesus speak, she suddenly felt exposed yet strangely safe. Like he wasn't condemning her, he was inviting her. Pure in heart didn't mean perfect. It didn't mean spotless. It meant undivided, honest, real. A heart not driven by hidden motives. A heart not split between God and the world. A heart that genuinely wanted truth more than image. A man with weathered hands swallowed hard. His entire life, he had tried to appear strong, respectable, in control. But deep down, he knew how often envy, anger, and pride poisoned his thoughts. Now, for the first time, he realized purity wasn't about pretending, it was about letting God cleanse what no one else could reach. And Jesus gave these people a promise almost too beautiful to imagine. They shall see God, not just in heaven, but in the world around them, in answered prayers, in moments of peace, in the quiet guidance of the Spirit, in the gentle way God shows up in ordinary days. The pure in heart begin to see God's fingerprints everywhere, in kindness, in forgiveness, in creation, in moments that feel too perfect to be coincidence. This was the sixth key to the kingdom. A heart honest enough for God to fill, clear enough for God to reflect through, and humble enough to let him transform it. As Jesus' words settled over the hillside, many felt something shift within them. A deep desire to live from a cleaner place, a truer place, a place where God was no longer distant. Because when your heart becomes clear, your vision of God becomes clearer too. Builders of peace in a broken world. The hillside felt different now, warmer, softer, almost sacred. People were no longer simply listening to Jesus. They were absorbing him. Each beatitude had touched a wound they carried. And now he spoke again, offering a calling that felt both beautiful and challenging. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. A quiet breath moved through the crowd. Peace, everyone wanted it, but very few knew how to create it. Most people knew how to fight back, defend themselves, or walk away. But making peace? That meant stepping into the middle of conflict with a steady heart and a gentle spirit. A man who once worked as a tax collector looked down at his hands. His job had broken families, ruined friendships, and built walls between him and his own people. For years, he felt like a storm wherever he went. Now Jesus was calling him to be something he never imagined, a source of peace. A mother with weary eyes held her child closer. Her home had been filled with arguments and tension for years. She thought peace was something she would never experience. But hearing Jesus speak, she felt hope rising. Maybe peace wasn't something that happened to you. Maybe it was something you created. Jesus wasn't asking them to avoid conflict. He was calling them to step into it with hearts anchored in love. Peacemakers weren't passive. Peacemakers weren't silent. Peacemakers were bridge builders, the ones who refused to let anger win, who chose understanding over pride, who stopped cycles of bitterness with one simple word: let's make this right. And then came the promise, a promise unlike any other in the Beatitudes. They shall be called the children of God, not because they were perfect, not because they never failed, but because peace is the family trait of heaven. When you make peace, you resemble the Father. You reflect His patience. You mirror His compassion. You carry His heart into the world. A fisherman near the front nodded slowly. He knew how hard it was to make peace with those who hurt you, but he also knew how powerful it could be. Jesus wasn't giving them a small task. He was giving them a mission worthy of a child of God. This was the seventh key to the kingdom, being a vessel of peace in a world that constantly tears itself apart. And as people looked around that hillside, they realized anyone can create chaos, but only the children of God create peace. The hillside was glowing now, touched by the late morning sun. People felt lighter, stronger, transformed. But Jesus wasn't finished. His next words carried a deeper weight, like he was preparing them for something real, something unavoidable. Then he spoke, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Immediately, the atmosphere shifted, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Everyone there knew what persecution felt like. Standing for truth came with a price. Doing what was right often made you a target. Choosing God over the world sometimes meant losing comfort, opportunities, even relationships. But Jesus didn't soften the reality. He didn't pretend the path of righteousness was easy. Instead, he declared something revolutionary: the ones the world pushes down, heaven lifts up. A young man in the crowd clenched his jaw. He had been mocked by friends for his faith. They called him naive, weak, simple-minded. But hearing Jesus now, he felt a fire in his spirit. What the world called weakness, God called blessed. A woman who had been rejected by her own family for choosing the path of faith felt her eyes sting. She had carried that loneliness for years. Now Jesus was looking straight into her pain and saying, "You're not forgotten. You're honored." Persecution wasn't a sign of failure. It was a sign of belonging, a sign that the light inside you was bright enough to threaten the darkness around you. Jesus continued, his voice filled with both tenderness and strength. "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice, for great is your reward in heaven." Great, not small, not symbolic, Great, because heaven doesn't overlook the courage it takes to stand alone. Heaven doesn't ignore the pain of being misunderstood. Heaven doesn't forget the moments you chose God even when it cost you something real. This was the 8th key to the kingdom. Courage, faith that refuses to bend, even when the world pushes back. And as Jesus' final beatitude echoed across the hillside, many realized a truth that shook them to their core. The path of righteousness might be costly, but the reward is eternal. With that last key, the kingdom of heaven felt closer than ever. Not just a promise for the future, but a strength for today. The mountain that still speaks today. Long after Jesus finished speaking, the crowd didn't move. No one wanted to break the moment. It felt as if heaven itself had settled on that hillside, soft, steady, unmistakably real. People looked at each other with faces changed by truth. Not louder, not prouder, but clearer, as if their hearts had been gently rewritten. For some, it felt like a fresh beginning. For others, like a wound finally treated. For many, it felt like they had heard the language of their soul for the first time. And yet, as the people slowly stood to leave, something remarkable happened. They didn't walk down the mountain as spectators. They walked down as carriers of a message. A young boy grabbed his father's hand tighter. "Is this how the kingdom works?" he whispered. His father nodded, eyes still moist. "Yes," he said softly. "This is the way." The crowd began dispersing, fishermen returning to their boats, mothers returning to their homes, workers returning to their tasks, but something inside them had shifted. The Beatitudes weren't just teachings. They were a new map for human living. A tax collector who always felt hated now understood mercy. A widow who lived in quiet grief now carried comfort. A carpenter who once fought through anger now pursued purity. A young shepherd who feared conflict now embraced peace. On that mountain, Jesus didn't give rules. He gave identity. He revealed who belongs to the kingdom. Not the flawless, not the proud, not the powerful, but the humble, the honest, the wounded, the seekers, the gentle, the brave. And that message didn't stay on the hillside. It traveled down with them. It traveled into their homes, their conversations, their daily routines. This was the true miracle. A kingdom built inside ordinary hearts, one beatitude at a time. As the last few people descended the slope, a quiet realization settled over them. What Jesus spoke wasn't just for them. It was for every generation that would ever feel lost, tired, broken, hungry, misunderstood, or alone. The mountain that day became more than a place. It became a voice that still whispers across centuries, calling humanity toward a different kind of greatness. And anyone willing to hear it can still climb that mountain, not with their feet, but with their heart. The keys placed in our hands. The hillside was empty now. The dust had settled, the voices had faded, and the sun dipped lower in the sky. But the words Jesus spoke still hung in the air alive, echoing, unforgettable. Those who walked down the mountain carried something far greater than they realized. They thought they had simply listened to a sermon, but heaven had placed 8 keys in their hands. Keys not made of metal, but of character, courage, and truth. Keys designed to unlock a different way of living. And even now, centuries later, those keys still wait for anyone willing to pick them up. A key for the humble, because heaven begins where ego ends. A key for the grieving, because God meets you in your deepest sorrows. A key for the gentle, because true strength doesn't need violence. A key for the hungry-hearted, because only righteousness fills the soul. A key for the merciful, because the world heals through forgiveness. A key for the pure, because a clean heart sees God everywhere. A key for the peacemaker, because heaven's children calm storms, not create them. A key for the courageous, because standing for truth is the mark of those who belong to the kingdom. 8 Beatitudes, 8 keys, 8 doors into a life the world cannot shake. But here is the final truth the mountain taught that day. The kingdom wasn't just something to enter, it was something to carry into the world. A poor fisherman became a voice of hope. A grieving woman became a source of comfort. A once angry man became a peacemaker. A doubting heart became a messenger of faith. Jesus didn't simply give instructions. He gave identity, purpose, and a roadmap to live a life bigger than fear, bigger than pride, bigger than the world's expectations. And now the question isn't, were you on that mountain? The real question is, will you live what Jesus spoke? Because the Beatitudes weren't meant to stay in the past. They were meant to live in us, in our homes, in our choices, in the quiet battles no one sees, in the moments that test who we really are. The mountain may be silent, but its message still calls to every heart. Take the keys, use them, and walk into the life God created you for. This is the kingdom, and it begins right here inside you.